Good evening. Well, I'm from a town. It's called Mattawamkeag. It's actually an Indian name. It's where two rivers meet. I grew up in a family, five. I got two sisters. My mom's a hairdresser and accountant. My father works in the woods. And I grew up in a family where my dad was always working. And my mom usually took care of me most of the time. I never see my dad much. When he was home, he was always sleeping, watching TV. Really never spent much time with him. And it was probably about junior high. I was going to church growing up, but it really wasn't a relationship with Jesus. It was more just going because it was an obligation. And I had just junior high, about 7th, 8th grade, I started hanging out with just friends that were, got into drugs. And I started getting into drugs, smoking pot, drinking. About 8th grade. 9th grade, I started getting into doing pills, where I'd be playing basketball. I was on the basketball team. We'd be doing pills on the back of the bus, and we'd get high before games and get messed up. And I had left my parents' house in 9th grade. I was living with drug dealers and my friends. I'd been going back and forth from my parents' house to my house, and I'd go in, steal money from them, and take stuff from the house, and I just lived a rebellious life, a foolish life, and I just didn't know better because I didn't have the comfort of love, when I was in my house at first. I didn't have the love that I needed growing up, so I decided to live on my own and do my own thing. So by the time I was a junior, I was living in so much sin and sexual sin, addictions. I was suicidal. I was at the point where I hated my life, hated everybody around me. Only people I liked was the people I did drugs with, and I despised my parents. I didn't honor them at all, and it was a very just depressive life, and I happened to be driving my truck. I had a couple buddies with me, and they were like mouthing off to me because we were all drunk and filled with a bunch of pills, and I had been doing crystal meth at the time. I just started doing crystal meth, and thank God that was, I was just starting to do it. They started, swearing at me, and I told them to get out of the truck, and I started swearing back out of them. I dropped them off right at the highway. And if anybody knows where Howland, Maine is, I know Richard knows where it is, but I dropped him off right off the highway. I didn't even get off the highway. I kicked him out, and I kept going, and I kept driving to about Orono, and I started feeling like I was going to black out and pass out. And I happened to just be at the point where I wanted to kill myself. I didn't like myself. So I was just like, God, you either, take over my life, and I need you really to save me from this life that I'm living. And I just cried out as I was in my pickup. And I happened to roll the truck over. And the next day, I found myself in the hospital, thinking back what happened. And I actually happened to walk up the bank out of that car accident because of the mercy of God. I walked up the bank, rolling over in the median and walking still. That's the mercy of God. How much He loves His children for how ignorant we are in some of our circumstances. And I happen to know the pastor a little bit from back when I went to church, and my parents had told me that at this moment in my life where I'd wrecked my vehicle, got an OUI, and was really ignorant to my parents and everything, I was actually driving towards my parents where they were camping in Newport, and they had to come get me at the Bangor Hospital and Eastern Maine Medical Center. And they told me that I needed to either go to a drug rehab center or I needed to get counseling. And at the moment, I was like, well, I could care less. I just wanted to kill myself. That's what I told them. I didn't like my life, and I was just miserable. And my father, as I told him that, they kept working. I just stayed in my room for about a week, and they kept working and doing their own thing. And I decided to get counseling with a pastor, and he started telling me, look, you can just start reading the Word, and I can, lead you to the Lord through a prayer, but that's not going to really be anything because you've done that before, and you didn't, I didn't really know the Lord, I didn't know Jesus. You really have to have an encounter of His love to really know Jesus. You really have to have an encounter where it affects your life and you have transformation, not just a prayer. And so I had just started reading the Word, and I'd given my heart over to Jesus. And I did the prayer like 2 weeks later and at the altar. But I still was into drugs, and little things at a time. I was breaking off from addictions. But it was kind of on my own strength, a little bit of it. But some of it was definitely the grace of God. But I believe that I hadn't encountered the love of God yet still. And 6 months went by after that period. This was in 2008. And then in 2009, my senior year, my parents got a divorce. And that just destroyed my even thought of God even being real. So I had left the house a lot. I stayed at home still. My parents really weren't paying attention to me much. Did what I wanted. Went back into drugs. 7 times worse. I was violent. I just would just flip out, tweak out on people. I got to the point where I was into Oxy 80s. Me and my cousin, he had lived in California, and he moved back to Maine after I graduated. And that summer of 2009, we were in his trailer. He was renting a trailer from my cousin, and we were doing Oxy 80s and drinking, having parties. And the night that I was supposed to be with him, I had gone home, and he happened to go to a party and drink. And he was drinking, and he started doing methadone and mixing stuff. And the next morning, I got a call from his parents that he was in the hospital, and that he was just all whacked up, puking up blood on the ground. And it was just so violent how he was puking up like bile and blood. And it just awakened me to the mercy of God again, and just see how He cherishes His people and gives them a second chance. And I just see that, and it opened up my heart. And 2 weeks later, I had just got on my knees before God on the altar at church, and I just gave my heart over to Jesus again. And that's when I first really encountered God, was when I fully knew I needed a Savior. I needed somebody to guide me in life. Somebody that would lead me, give me counsel when I need counsel, and I don't have to go to man or go to a figure where it's humanism. I can go to the Father myself and get actually counsel through His Spirit that will lead you. And I started to realize that through just starting to read the Word more. I happened to leave Maine and start pursuing a career in automotives. I was doing mixed martial arts. I was doing working at Starbucks, and I happened to be in my apartment and just weeping on the floor, encountering God as I read His Word. And it just shows that His Word is just living waters to your soul. That once you read your Word, you'll be transformed into a new creation, a new person. And I started to just get different, just hear from God, and He started to tell me to move back, to give up everything that I had, and to move back. And that's just like the cost of discipleship. He told His disciples to give up everything they had and to follow Him. And so that's what I did. I was like, well, Your grace is sufficient, Father, and I'm just going to give everything up and trust You. I moved back home, and I lived with my father, and I comforted him while he was going through the divorce. And he was so hurt that he couldn't be a father to me. I had to actually comfort him. And that's at the point where my whole life it was like that. Like, I never really my dad never comforted me at all, and I never got the love because he was a workaholic. All he cared about was a system of the world, American dream, where the cars, the clothes, the money, my mom had them, they were both wrapped up in that. And they went to church, They were wrapped up in prosperity rather than prosperity of your soul, where you got peace inside, that nothing matters but the peace and love of God that will lead you and guide you. And I just want to tell you that if there's anybody in here that hasn't encountered the love of the Father and really needs to be embraced, that I just ask you just to get prayer and ask somebody just to love on you. And I just thank you guys. I love you guys.
God bless you.
Bless you, man.